Hey everybody, welcome to What Culture Gaming. I'm Scott, I'm joined by Josh.
Hello.
And Jules.
Hey everyone.
And I'm incredibly ill and bunged up. Let's talk about Cyberpunk 2077.
Are you bunged up because of all the details that we have about this game?
Yes, although one of the details of the game, nice segue, is that it's actually in first person, despite the fact that CD Projekt RED are clearly very much a third-person developer team.
This has been sort of like a point of contention that a lot of people are sort of getting their noses up about. Like, is Cyberpunk going to suffer at the hands of being a first-person, air quotes, shooter?
Yes.
I'm on the side where I actually, in our previous video, I was worried about it. Now I actually changed my mind. I think that a first person will suit this very well. And the reason that I'm going that I believe this is two words for you: Deus Ex.
Two other words for you: mankind divided. But
yeah.
I think. Oh, go on.
I was going to say those two words are the same reasons I'm both excited and sort of a bit wary because as a whole, Deus Ex kind of proves that you can make like a really deep RPG experience in first person, but at the same time, what does Cyberpunk have to sort of differentiate it from Deus Ex?
True.
I think that being in a third-person perspective, if we look at the likes of, I know this is a bit weird, but Bungie,
BioWare?
what does Bungie make at the moment that everyone bloody hates?
Destiny.
God,
Right.
why was that not on the right?
No one cares about
so now Destiny 1 and 2 played with the first-person and third-person dynamic, allowing people to switch to third-person if they wanted to do jumping and use their skills and things like that. I think that if CD Projekt RED are clever, they will make sure that you can switch to the third person to like vault over walls and stuff like that. Because platforming and doing that with the depth perception can be.
See, they've said that you can't do that.
Oh, they have, have they?
So,
actually, right, I wasn't aware of that.
I think we should have. We'll do both sides of this argument.
Okay, sure.
Because right now, what they've put out there is that everything is in first person. It goes to third person when you're in certain cutscenes, and it goes to third when you're driving. But the driving is optional. You can drive in first if you want.
Okay.
It's predominantly in first person, even when you're platforming, and they revealed that you can do things like you can climb walls with your spike arms and stuff like that. But it's always in first person.
Oh, I'm not sure if I like that. No,
right.
Actually.
So
yeah.
we'll do these. We'll do these two sides of it. Let's initially go with the idea of it, and we'll try and draw some sort of conclusion at the end.
Sure.
So let's go with the idea that first person is potentially a bad thing. What does it limit? Because my initial thing was that it limits combat, especially in relation to the Witcher games. Obviously, the Witcher 2 and 3 especially are very much about managing groups of enemies. In 3, you had all sorts of like finishers and combos, and they made it. They gave you 2 dodge buttons, so you had this sort of way of being this taking on groups of people. You can't really do that in first person, which immediately means that it has to play differently. So there's that.
Well, this is the thing. It depends on how you want to approach combat. Like if you are of the mindset of run and or gun, then that will actually work perfectly well because it is a first person shooter. However, if you are told that you can buff up your sort of kung fu skills, as it were, your future kung fu, then how am I going to use future kung fu in first person? Like the best example of a third person sort of thing, Jade Empire.
Ooh.
That had a good fighting system. If they could have done the first person that switched it to third person with a tap of a button.
I guess. I mean, like in terms of third person melee fighting, I guess I'd go with something like.
I know one you're going to go for. The one that you keep telling me to get, but I haven't played yet.
Well, it's not going to be Neo.
The one where you slap people.
Yakuza?
No, not. Well, that is a good one.
I was going to go with Absolver, but
that's the one I was talking about.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one of the things is a weak slap.
Yeah, because the whole thing, obviously, you've got Absolver. That whole game was pretty much just Dark Souls with melee, with kung fu and karate and stuff. First-person melee stuff, my mind goes to Mirror's Edge, which I hated the combat in that.
Yeah, it was the weakest part of the game.
Like first-person melee stuff, but Chronicles of Riddick did it pretty well. But I can't think of anything else that did first-person fighting very well. I mean, that's
Dishonored.
I'm with you. I think it was a pretty decent system. I thought Dying Light does first-person combat pretty decently.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going on the wishy-washy subject, Dead Island.
Limb targeting. Yeah, kind of. It's one of those things where I think if first-person melee systems don't have a great track record, there are certain games where they're fine, but there's rarely been a game that's been sold on it. I mean, this is all very assumptive. This is to assume that Cyberpunk has a heavy melee element, which I don't think it does. I think it's very much about hacking from afar. It reminds me a lot of Syndicate from 2013.
But that's the thing is that they have just said it's choice, except when it comes to how you actually play the game. If they just say you can only do this first person thing, then I would say in the future people would still use weapons, clubs, things like that. Like surely.
You've got your blade arms. That's one thing from Deus Ex that they've confirmed from the initial footage that's in the new stuff.
I guess, I don't know, for me it's just a sort of contention of, is this the game they're making? They're making a first-person shooter and they're saying, well, a first-person RPG that they keep reiterating. But is it just sort of like a distance between what people want and what the developers want to do, because they want to create this combat system that's more based around sort of gunplay rather than melee like the Witcher. And if we're coming in and being like, oh, it's not what we sort of want.
If anything, we are going in with this thing of it's not the Witcher in Cyberpunk future, which is unfortunately what they're going to carry forward, because it is their.
How sad is that sentence?
But that's the thing. What they might be creating is something better.
Yes.
Like they might be looking at this and just being like, okay, why are you guys so hung up on combat and third person when in actuality we're delivering a fantastic game? If your critique of it is going to be something that was never intended to be in the game, then we don't stand. I mean, I include myself in that.
I think they could have done a better job with communicating maybe what this is going to be. I mean, it seems like it was, reading a lot of the developer interviews that have come out of E3, it seems like they actually wanted it to be first person from the beginning. Because they said that you're not playing, obviously in The Witcher you play as Geralt, so not Geralt. But you're playing as Geralt, so it's like you're playing as an established character, it's someone that you're seeing from a different perspective. Whereas this time you're playing as a character called V, but they're fully customizable, so they want you to be in the character.
And I think that
they could have communicated.
But I think that's where again the third person, first person dynamic does actually come into play. If you're spending that amount of time in a character customization suite and you're making this character, dressing them exactly how you want, you want to be able to see them. You don't like that's where like Dead Rising was so much fun because of the fact that you got to make Frank West look as silly as you wanted him to. But here, if you're just spending hours and hours and hours doing it and you're not going to see their face ever again, that's kind of like what is it Miyazaki from Dark Souls?
Right.
He said, like when they were doing, like everyone was like, why didn't you put loads of character creation options in? And I think that he went on record as just stating, you're wearing armor 24/7, and when you're not, when you die, you turn into beef jerky. So why would you?
I always think of that when I'm doing the face. I'm never going to see this face, so it doesn't really matter.
The one counter I have to that is that we don't know how much sort of gunplay or combat itself is even going to like be in like the Cyberpunk. The Witcher had like an emphasis on combat, but also it had a huge emphasis on like just talking and exploring and stuff. And obviously in Cyberpunk, when you are talking to people, it's going to cut to that third person perspective.
And to that end as well, they have said that to not think of it as a shooter with RPG elements, think of it as an RPG with shooter elements. So it's going to be minimal shooting. Another thing that came out of lots of the hands-on descriptions of the gameplay demo that we haven't seen, but is out there, is that at one point the character goes to get a new eye augment, and they go to this person who sells eyes, and when you basically buy a new eye, your vision gets turned off and it comes back on the shelf from the other eye. And so you're looking at your character from the shelf, and then you get your other eye gets picked up and put in. So things like that might be nice ways for them to sort of like show what your character looks like in scenarios that make sense. I do think that obviously there is a contention based on people assume that it was going to be The Witcher in a sci-fi setting. That's definitely what I thought it was going to be. And it took a lot of like reading up on hands-on stuff to be like, okay, it sounds promising, but
I come from a place where I am not worried about how this game will do. I feel I totally trust this developer to actually deliver on what they want to put out there. The only thing is that I always think back to one of my favourite games of all time, which is BioShock. And I think about how Ken Levine came out and said that I wanted to make this type of game, but the studio told me that it had to have shooter elements in it. Now, I just hope that CD Projekt RED, I always his name up, CD Projekt RED, I just hope that they aren't bowing to what they think consumers will want. So like if it's this shooter thing that they felt like they had to put it in because they realised that no one would want to play a story game. And it's not and before you say, oh, I'd play a story game, people speak with their wallets, and that's the thing. You've got to realise that like first person shooters are the highest selling genre in video games.
Yeah, true. I think
I was gonna say I don't think they're sort of like the type of developers to do that. Even before like Witcher 3 was a huge success, but the other two Witcher games weren't. They certainly had their fans and like they had their fan bases. Oh, it was like really great games, but it was like The Witcher 3 from a commercial standpoint was a completely another level. Like launched their CD Projekt RED to like the top ranks, and now they're beloved. So I think by sticking to their guns throughout that series and being like, look, these are the games we want to make. We want to make these experiences. We want to make these RPGs. I think to then go into Cyberpunk after such a long development time, saying this is what we want to make. We want to make a first-person shooter. To me, that doesn't seem like they're sort of being like, oh, people like first-person shooters. We should probably go down that market.
If they were going to strike when the iron was hot, they would have done it years ago. I think it's one of those things where, like, I mean, the other side of them doing such a drastic change, like, fundamentally, demonstrably means that it's going to be a different game to The Witcher, and it means that they're not pigeonholing themselves into a particular mold, which is admirable. And they are a developer-publisher combo. They don't have anyone else to answer to. All their investors are themselves. NoClip did a great documentary on how they're funded and all that kind of stuff, and just how independent they are to a fault. It ends up, there's a lot of risk in the projects they do. But it's one of those things where, I mean, I guess the flip side is looking at the things that first person might impact, which Actually, no, did we start with negatives? Jesus.
No, we're on to the positives now, about how it could be a good thing. And there are many good things that a first-person perspective does. It's in terms of immersion, you could say that it actually helps. I know that there's a 50-50 split on that. I think that seeing the world through the eyes of somebody, especially a world that's going to be as beautiful as the one that they're marketing, is going to be fantastic. It does improve combat if it is focused on gunplay, because it's the right way, I'd say, to play first-person shooters. And being able to like pick up objects and do that, get closer to an object. I mean, there are definitely perks to it. I just think that I fell off a lot of ledges in Mirror's Edge.
Funnily enough, though, for me, the biggest pro of this game being first person is the movement system itself. Because I bloody love The Witcher 3. I thought that's like one of like perhaps my favorite game of the generation so far.
Yeah,
I make that claim now.
I would back that.
Yeah, it's like incredible. But the movement system in that was really janky, and it always felt like the combat system itself was the combat system was great, but it was sort of fighting against the way you kind of moved in that world.
I can see that actually. Yeah.
And I think with first person, the way like they're describing it, the way you can like climb up walls with like your arms and stuff, it feels like they're trying to sort of take what was perhaps the weakest element of The Witcher 3 and expand upon it and make actually moving around in the world as interesting as the rest of the elements they're good at.
I mean, there was a game, I don't know if you guys play it, called Brink a while back, and they did parkour, and like the game didn't do too well, but the parkour system that they used was actually quite a good feature.
It was good for the time,
Even if something like that was in it with Mirror's Edge, I mean, there are ways of making this work, and I think that it only just comes from a founded worry of I want to see my character and I want to be able to make sure that I make platforming jumps properly.
I think that's the thing. Is it's going to come down to the way that you like playing, and it's not that there aren't great like locomotion heavy first-person shooters. Titanfall was a phenomenal example of something where wall running and being constantly on the move worked really well.
By the way, Titanfall 2 is bloody great.
Not
enough people supported that.
Oh god, Titanfall 2 is just one of those underrated gems of all time.
Oh, lots of old times in this video.
Oh mate, but it's so good. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think that they've made a hell of a decision to go first person. I wish they'd got it out there ahead of time. Or I don't know, I wish they'd showcased the benefits of first person more. Because I can see why people are so split on it. You kind of go into it assuming it's going to be The Witcher in a sci-fi setting, and there are pros and cons.
Like for me, the only worries I have about it going first person is what other games have done. Like we've seen Fallout go first person compared to like the isometric view of the earlier games. We've seen other like you said, like BioShock say they're RPGs, but really they're just first person shooters, and the RPG thing comes second. I think a lot of, if I have any worry, it's that there's a precedent for things being first person and only sort of paying lip service to RPG elements where you want this to be an RPG first and foremost and a shooter second, which they do keep reiterating.
True, but it's just whether they can deliver on that. I mean, let us know what you think about it down in the comment section below though. I mean, which ones do you prefer? You a third person boy or a first person punk?
Cyberpunk.
We'd love to hear all of your comments there. But let us know what you're thinking, and as always, stay tuned, because as soon as we get more Cyberpunk news, we will be delivering them to you. As always, I've been Jules.
I've been Scott.
I've been Josh.
You've been awesome, and we'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.